people who work for Gypsies and Travellers for free, and I think it's really important that we say thanks to them as well. And the Gypsies and Travellers themselves, our clients, because they are fantastic people and they really do deserve to be properly represented. I'm now going to pass you over to perhaps the person we should thank the most for all the work we do, Lord Avebury, who has been instrumental in trying to change the law and successful in doing so over many, many years in Parliament and outside of Parliament. So if I could ask you to perhaps put your hands together for Lord Avebury.
Thank you, Mark. Well, I mean, it's great to be here and to be welcoming this second edition of the Traveller Law Handbook, Gypsy and Travellers Law Handbook, and to congratulate everybody who's been concerned with the production of this wonderful piece of work. The only person that Mark left out, of course, was himself, and I'd like to thank him particularly, and his co-editor Chris Johnson, for doing such a fantastic piece of work, which is going to be of huge importance to the practitioners, to people in local authorities, to MPs, peers, academics, practitioners, and of course to the Gypsies and Travellers themselves, who we're delighted to have participating in this event this evening. As you know, I mean, that events are moving a little bit slowly towards the redress of the gross inequalities that have affected the Gypsy and Traveller community for the past 5 decades, and certainly since I've been involved in working on behalf of Gypsies and Travellers, which was when I came into Parliament 45 years ago. There's been a little bit of progress since then, but the inequalities that exist in access to accommodation, to health, to education and to public services of all kinds still persist, and there's a lot of work still to be done. What you have in the new handbook is a very comprehensive description of the new planning framework, which came into existence with the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act of 2004 and the Housing Act of that year, which will, if it goes right, ultimately deliver the land that's needed for the provision of accommodation for gypsies in England and Wales. And that will be a huge step in the direction of the assertion of all the other rights which they've lacked in the past. And that's very well covered in the book. There's a chapter on planning, which I think will be of enormous importance to practitioners of the field. It does look as though it's going to be a long drawn-out process, because first of all the Gypsy and Traveller accommodation needs assessments are supposed to be finished by the end of this year, but there's already been a slippage, and they're talking about March 2008. After that, we still have to go towards the regional spatial strategies, which will incorporate the results of the accommodation assessments, together with where those assessments are defective, a calculation based on a formula which was developed by Pat Niner. Those will all have to be integrated into a direction to each individual local authority to provide so many pitches for Gypsies and Travellers over such and such a period of years. And that process is liable to public consultation and public inquiries, a process which, as you know, takes a considerable length of time. But then, in the meanwhile, there's a process which is also described very well in this chapter, which is what Circular 106 says, that where there's a clear and unmet need, and in other words, in every single area of the country where there's unauthorised encampments of Gypsies and Travellers, that planning authorities should bring forward development plan documents containing site allocations in advance of the regional allocation of pitches to individual local authorities. And if they don't, the circular says that they should agree to temporary permissions in places that may be less than suitable, in the expectation that in the end, once the land is provided for the sites, then people will be able to move on to the areas for which planning permission is given. And you've got the text of the circular as a very helpful appendix at the end of this handbook. There is a problem with the production of any handbook of this kind, and Mark's already referred to one aspect of it, in that the CEHR finished up as an ECHR. But there are also other areas of the law where there are changes occurring on a more or less daily basis. And I think the editors have to shoot at a moving target because you've got a constant flood of circulars, statutory instruments, primary legislation, all the time, to say nothing of the case law itself. And there's, I think, preliminary evidence to show that since Circular 106 came to force, there is a higher rate of success with appeals, mainly due to the work of the dedicated lawyers such as Chris and Mark. And there may be particular cases that have a bearing on that rate as time goes on. So that'll be one change. And meanwhile, we've got clause 272 of the Housing Regeneration Bill coming down the track, which I hope will give full satisfaction of the Commoner's judgment of the European Court, which is dealt with in Chapter 3. In the Housing Act of 2004, the courts were given power to suspend possession orders for up to 12 months, and that could be renewed indefinitely. But now, gypsies and travellers on local authority sites that have the same rights of security and tenure as are covered by the Mobile Homes Act 1983. And then there's one more example of recent developments which we were discussing a few minutes ago, and that is the judgment of the European Court of Human Rights earlier this month in the case of DH and others versus Czech Republic, in which it was found that a difference of treatment of Roma children in the educational system constituted a violation of Article 14, read together with Article 2 of Protocol 1. And the educational outcome of gypsy and traveller children in England is, of course, still grossly inferior to that of the settled population. And I hope I'm not breaking any confidence when I say to you, I did talk to Anthony Lester, who is the lawyer who dealt with this case before the European Court of Human Rights, and I asked him whether he thought it had any implications for England and Wales, and he was very interested in this suggestion that although we do make considerable efforts to improve the standards of gypsy education in this country, there's still an awful long way to go, and there's still all too many gypsies and travellers who don't benefit from the educational system as others do. Anyway, those are some of the recent developments, which no doubt will be in the third edition. In the meanwhile, we look forward very much to making the most of what we've got now. Thank you very much.